So the topic for today is plant-based proteins. And this is a very, very interesting and important topic. There is a lot of research on plant-based foods, its health benefits for all kinds of disease prevention, including cancer. However, one size doesn't fit all, and there's definitely ways to go about it healthfully to make it right for you. So we'll go through those things and answer all your questions. So now you see me. There, my hair's down. Here, my hair is up. I am a dietitian. I'm licensed in a few different states. I have a private practice. I am board certified in oncology dietitian and have been for about the past 15 years. I accept most major insurance plans. So if you feel like talking more would be helpful. If you're looking for more in-depth one-on-one support, definitely reach out. I believe I put my contact information at the end, but we can always give that to you as well. Okay, so now getting back to the topic at hand, how do plants influence overall health, and specifically cancer risk? So there are these four main themes in terms of how plants help to positively influence our health and decrease cancer risk. So first is by impacting the immune system. Second is by impacting levels of inflammation. Third is by impacting hormonal balance, which we don't always think about plants having the ability to do that. And fourth is by impacting our digestion and detoxification systems. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to focus on these first three bullet points. So, immune system, inflammation, and hormonal balance. We recently had, maybe a couple months ago, had a whole presentation on digestion, detoxification. And so today I just wanted to make sure we have time to delve into those other topics, but there is some overlap. So you may hear me mention some of those digestive benefits as well within these other systems. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the immune system. Food can impact the immune system in lots of different ways. We know that obviously certain medications that people are on can also affect the immune system. Chemotherapies can decrease the immune system because they're affecting any cells that are dividing quickly, including our white blood cells, for example, which are part of our immune system. Also, depending on what kind of diagnosis you have, it may directly impact your immune system. And then thirdly, now there's immunotherapies, which actually boost the immune system and send it into overdrive to kind of act as a surveillance and recognize anything that's not behaving correctly. But there are some direct connections between what we eat and the immune system. So the first thing when I'm sitting down with someone that is like looking to optimize their immune function, or, even someone that, may not be affected by cancer, but finds that they're getting sick a lot, or are just looking to do everything they can to help themselves. The first question that we usually sit down and ask is, are you eating enough? Um, the body has so many different systems, and we forget that each system requires energy. Even when we're sitting down, our bodies are working, our hearts are pumping, our brains are activated, nerve signals are being sent, muscles are being engaged. So even at rest, our body requires a certain amount of energy just to sustain itself. Taking that a step further, we may or may, if you're not eating enough, then fueling other systems that may feel a little more optional to our bodies don't get the power and the fuel to do so because they're not, your body has to use the energy just to maintain what's going on for everyday function first. So things like the immune system may take a hit if you're simply not eating enough for your your needs every day. And then just building on that, the second question on the slide is, are you eating enough protein specifically? So interestingly enough, I think protein has become a big buzzword, especially in light of the new food pyramid, which we can have a whole presentation on what we think about the new food pyramid. But that being said, our bodies do not store protein for energy. We do store carbohydrates in the form of glycogen. We do store fats, but we don't store protein. So you do generally need to replenish your protein stores every day in order for your body not to break things down. Our biggest source of protein that our bodies will draw upon if we're not eating enough is our muscles and our muscle tissue. So we want to make sure that you're eating enough protein. Also, the building block for regenerating new cells is protein. So we want to make sure, again, white blood cells are part of the immune system. Are we eating enough protein? Well, how much protein? And I think we get into this a little later when we're kind of analyzing how much protein through plants you need to meet your needs. Everyone's protein needs are slightly different depending on past medical history. Certain things decrease your protein needs, like if you have any kidney conditions. Other things could increase your protein needs, like certain conditions that you have, your activity level, certain life stages that you're in. Very, very generally speaking, if you take your weight in kilograms, so you take your weight in pounds and divide it by 2.2, that's your weight in kilograms. And then that's about how many grams of protein you need to eat in a day. So generally speaking, you need about 1 gram of protein for every kilogram of body weight. Again, it could go up or down depending on what's going on. That's just a very general recommendation. So are you eating enough protein? And are you getting enough micronutrients? So macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, fats. Micronutrients are your vitamins and minerals. Certain vitamins and minerals have a direct relationship with the immune system. Zinc, for example, helps to fuel the immune system and fight acute infections like colds. Also helps in another part of the immune system that we don't often think about, which is like tissue healing and wound healing. Zinc plays a big role in that. Vitamin C, there's different lines of thought and different research about vitamin C in the immune system, but are you getting enough of the micronutrients that you need over a typical day? There's, again, different ways to think about and analyze that. Then there are some foods that directly influence the immune system, and there's been research on helping to boost the immune system. First category here is mushrooms. So many different kinds of mushrooms that are grown out there and now in different products as well. You can find mushroom-based teas and coffee. There's a kind of tea called chaga tea, which is made from mushrooms. There's turkey tail mushrooms, reishi mushrooms. There's shiitake mushrooms, portobello mushrooms. In general, the darker the color of the mushroom, more of the benefit. But mushrooms in general really help the immune system. The research has shown that the mushroom cell wall resembles a bacteria cell wall. So after you eat it, your body kind of thinks it's bacteria and revs up your immune system, but then realizes that it's not. So it kind of invokes this immune response. So definitely a good thing to incorporate as part of your diet. In terms of supplements, as you can see here, always check for interactions because even with healthy things, there are interactions, both with conditions and medications. Ginger is the next food that can influence immune health. Ginger um, is great to have in as a tea, as part of your cooking. They sell the whole root of ginger, which you peel and cut up and can cook, or they also sell frozen cubes of ginger, which you can cook with. Um, Oregano is a very powerful antifungal, antibacterial herb. So also a wonderful thing to incorporate into your cooking. Probiotics, prebiotics. So prebiotics are the food for the good bacteria that we want to flourish in our bodies. Probiotics are the good bacteria. And the idea is that if you have more of the good bacteria, it can crowd out some of the bad bacteria. And if you think about it, and I know we're not getting a ton into digestive health today, but your digestive system is one of the first lines of defense. It kind of separates the outside world and the inside world. So it plays a large role in the immune system. So keeping a healthy gut can also positively increase the immune system. And then there's different herbs that have been looked at. Astragalus is one of them. It is traditionally a Chinese herb that has been shown to stimulate the T cells as part of our immune system. Elderberry is kind of a sweet berry that people will drink the syrup of, but will also sometimes take as supplements. Again, always good to check in with your provider to make sure that supplements are right and okay for you. There's also eating habits that influence the immune system, and sometimes the lowest hanging fruit makes the biggest difference. So, the first bullet point, which we've had a whole session on, is mindfulness and stress reduction. So, oftentimes, mealtime can be stressful, or we're rushing from place to place or appointment to appointment and really not having the time or taking the time to eat and eat mindfully. Eating mindfully means using your senses to notice the food, taking time to chew your food well. Um, and actually, if you take a couple of deep belly breaths before eating, that is a really positive way to both influence your digestive health, but also your immune system. We have two main nervous systems in our body. You may have heard of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight, and that's what happens when we're stressed. So it's kind of an adaptation. If your body is stressed, it doesn't know if you're running from danger or you're just stressed about what's going on right now in your life. And so what happens biologically is that the blood supply kind of goes away from the non-essential organs, non-essential functions, similar to not eating enough, and just goes to the things that your body thinks it needs to escape danger. So goes to activating muscles, goes to all these things so that you can outrun that bear. But in modern day society, it's not often that we're physically outrunning danger. It's usually just more chronic stress that we're feeling. So taking three big, deep belly breaths at the beginning of a meal may bring the blood supply more to the digestive system and just help to activate that parasympathetic or calming nervous system that will help you to digest the food better. Limiting alcohol intake. Unfortunately, alcohol is related to every kind of cancer. In terms of how much, we know that the American Institute of Cancer Research says no more than 2 drinks a day for men, no more than 1 drink a day for women as an upper limit, if that's something that you're kind of used to drinking. But we know that alcohol also will similarly take the energy from your body to detoxing and take that energy away from other systems like the immune system. And just bringing it all home, again, our immune system is our first line of defense to recognizing any cells that aren't behaving correctly. So, as much as possible, we want to make sure our immune system is working as efficiently and properly as possible within our realm of control. So, the next topic of things that plants influence is inflammation. So, inflammation can influence most diseases. And to an extent, inflammation is a really important part of our bodies, is an important part of healing. Like sometimes people will say, oh, well, why do we even have inflammation? Well, inflammation helps bring blood supply to certain areas to promote healing. So again, if you get a cut or wound, there's going to be a degree of inflammation to help heal this area. However, unfortunately, through a variety of factors, one of which it could be diet and lifestyle, our levels of inflammation could be higher than ideal in terms of disease risk. There is some research on the Mediterranean diet pattern as lowering levels of inflammation. And they can actually measure levels of inflammation through a couple different blood markers, including something called C-reactive protein or CRP, something called TNF. There's different levels of inflammation that actually can be measured. So I wanted to just draw the attention to what the Mediterranean diet pyramid actually looks like and promotes, since we hear Mediterranean diet all the time. Very interesting. You see at the base of the pyramid, they promote daily physical activity. I want to just let you know, and I think we talk about physical activity a little later as well. Physical activity can mean and should mean different things to different people, different things on different days. Um, the first thing that I always recommend when it comes to physical activity is try to find something that you enjoy or do something with someone that you enjoy being around because that can be really, really motivating, and make activity as enjoyable as it can be for you. Um, the other thing is setting small, realistic goals. In other parts of the world, there's a great book and I think a documentary now called The Blue Zones, where it talks about the places of the world that live the longest, but also the healthiest lives. In general, a lot of the societies that were researched through that are not necessarily going to the gym. They just are moving more throughout their days. So, if you're not in a town where you can walk to things, you can kind of self-create that to an extent. You know, you can set an alarm and every hour on the hour get up and move around. You can walk down to a neighbor's house and back. During a commercial, you could just get up and walk around where you're living. Or even if you're sitting on the couch and it's hard to move, you can move your arms and legs for set a timer for 2 minutes to start and do it 2 minutes at a time every hour. By the end of the day, that really does add up and helps to decrease levels of inflammation in our body, which is ultimately the goal. The next part of the pyramid has to do with whole grains. We know that whole grains and sometimes carbohydrates get a bad rap, but they really do contain a lot of essential things that are really important for our overall health. Whole grains contain certain kinds of fiber, like those prebiotics, the food for the good bacteria in our guts. So that also helps to fuel our immune system. Whole grains contain nice amounts of soluble fiber. There's different kinds of fiber, soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber actually helps to bind to bile and remove it from the body. Bile is the backbone of bile is cholesterol, but the backbone of other things in our bodies is also cholesterol, like hormones, which we'll get into in the next section. So as you're removing bile, your body has to draw upon more cholesterol to make more bile to have it to support your body. And so that helps to keep your cholesterol levels down, but also helps to reduce excess hormones that may be in the body, um, and actually remove some toxins from the body through the bile. The next category is fruits, vegetables, and legumes and nuts. So it's interesting that legumes and nuts are in the same category as fruits and vegetables. Legumes and nuts are a great source of plant protein, which we'll show you in a little bit. Legumes are things like beans, chickpeas, peanuts are actually considered legumes, and then nuts and seeds, almonds, walnuts, Brazil nuts, all things of that nature. Brazil nuts actually contain a lot of selenium, which we didn't mention as one of those micronutrients which helps fuel a healthy immune system. Fruits and vegetables, besides having fiber, have a lot of micronutrients as well, a lot of antioxidants, which help to stabilize unstable cells, a lot of fluids to keep us hydrated, and not a lot of caloric density. So they'll help to fill you up and meet your needs without oftentimes eating more than you maybe need. Olive oil is the next category. So olive oil is a unsaturated fat. All fats, including butter, including lard, including olive oil, all contain the same amount of calories in a given space. So it's a smaller category here, but it is above fruits and vegetables. Olive oil can also lower levels of inflammation, particularly extra virgin olive oil. Olive oil is really best and healthiest when you drizzle it on something that's already cooked or something that's cool as opposed to cooking with it. Olive oil is a little more unstable at high temperatures. Cheese and yogurt are the next category. Both cheese and yogurt contain probiotics, or the good bacteria for our guts, and a little bit of protein as well. And then you'll notice after that, as part of the weekly part of the Mediterranean diet, you have more animal products, right? Fish, poultry, eggs, and sweets. And then red meats at the top as being monthly. So a lot of these plans are emphasized for more the daily, and then some of those other things are more on the weekly. Water is also a nice part of the Mediterranean diet. They do include wine in moderation, but again, in terms of the risk benefit, it's best to kind of keep at a minimum and then eat your red grapes so that you get that resveratrol antioxidant benefit that has been touted for heart health benefits. So we talked about a lot of this as we went through the pyramid, but just distilling the main points and um, headers. The Mediterranean diet is primarily focused on plant-based foods, including fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, and legumes. As opposed to using animal fats, you use a lot of plant fats like olive oil, using different herbs and spices instead of salt when possible to flavor food. And again, that oregano we know is good for the immune system too. Limiting red meat, eating fish and poultry a couple times a week, and again, drinking red wine in moderation, which we spoke about as being, something to just reduce as much as possible. And based on that, we know that the Mediterranean diet is really rich in fiber and antioxidants. Besides helping lower risk of cancer, can also lower your blood sugar and cholesterol, increase longevity, and may reduce muscle weakness and other signs of frailty. Now, all these is based in research. We have the um, citations if anyone is interested as well. There are within each category specific fruits that help to decrease levels of inflammation. Berries, cherries, pineapple, lemon, apples all contain phytochemicals that help to lower levels of inflammation. Apples, for example, contain the phytochemical quercetin, which helps to lower allergies, lower levels of inflammation. We know that spices also can help lower levels of inflammation. And again, we want to emphasize spices to flavor foods as much as possible instead of using as much salt. A little salt is okay, but instead of using as much, turmeric and ginger directly influence those inflammatory markers that I mentioned earlier. And people underestimate the ability of more simple spices like basil and rosemary and oregano to have an impact, but they each have benefits. There was a large study with rosemary that if you put it on red meat when you cook it, it helps to lower the oxidative chemicals that can form on it. So all interesting. Um, Real quick, turmeric, I'm just gonna quickly highlight since it's a frequently asked question, but it has been researched to help prevent unwanted cells from getting into the blood supply. And that's one of the main benefits. But for people with physical feelings of inflammation, like joint pain, oftentimes incorporating turmeric into the diet can lessen that feeling and physical sensation. So you also may hear turmeric interchanged with curcumin. Curcumin is the phytochemical that's found within turmeric. Happens to also have some iron and manganese. Many people get low in iron, particularly when they're on certain medications. So it's good to kind of make sure you're incorporating all sources of iron, including plant sources. Rosemary, we just spoke about as well. Ginger, I know we spoke about earlier, but one other thing that we didn't mention is that ginger is also a great tool to protect against digestive distress. So, nausea, vomiting, bloating. Ginger actually contains a very powerful chemical component that's similar to one of the most popular anti-nausea medications, Zofran. So, oftentimes, consuming ginger products can help increase the immune system and decrease inflammation, but also help with any stomach sort of ailments. Cinnamon's also one of these underestimated spices. There's a kind of cinnamon called Ceylon cinnamon, which is Ceylon, which has a lot of beneficial antioxidant activity. And cinnamon also helps with blood sugar control. Besides the fact that I think it adds like a warmth and a nice aroma to what you're eating. So you may not have usually think of it, but you can sprinkle cinnamon on things like your yogurt or your cereal or in your coffee or tea, and all those will impart an additional benefit without maybe feeling like such a hard reach. Of course, I had to highlight garlic. Garlic and onions are in the same family of vegetables called the allium family. And if you go on the American Institute of Cancer Research's website or AICR, they have a whole site on foods that have been shown to protect against cancer. Garlic and onions and foods in this allium family are in them, specifically as being protective against cancers of the digestive tract. Um, and there was actually a study. So the antioxidant that's found in garlic is called allicin. Allicin, I believe. And so allicin, I know it's similar to that allium. Actually, if you cut up your onions or your garlic and you let it sit at room temperature for 5 minutes before putting it on the heat, kind of there's a chemical reaction that happens that encapsulates that allicin and protects it from being destroyed in the heat. So if you get a chance if you're cooking with something like garlic or onions, cut it up and then do something else as part of what you're making and then put it on the heat so you can really maximize that health benefit that you get. And things like garlic can be very tedious to cut up. Like I'm looking at this picture of the cloves and I'm just thinking about all the little papery things you have to peel, and um it can take a while. It could be difficult in terms of dexterity if you're having things like neuropathy. So again, sometimes people will buy the frozen cubes of garlic, which are really nice and easy to use. I've had people ask me about using the refrigerator minced garlic. That's also perfectly fine to use. Just check if there's any other ingredients that you may or may not want as part of your cooking or your recipe or your intake. Even the powdered spices, like garlic powder, still have a degree of benefits. So if that's more convenient for you, don't let it stop you. It will offer you some great antioxidant protection and decrease your levels of inflammation. So now, just again, kind of thinking about things in terms of that Mediterranean pyramid, all of these nuts and seeds listed here also actively decrease levels of inflammation. Most of these you may have heard of, like walnuts, which actually contain omega-3 fats. Omega-3 fats are anti-inflammatory, and we know actually oppose omega-6 fats, which are more inflammatory and help bring down levels of inflammation. There are other sources of omega-3s found in plants, like hemp seeds, chia seeds, even some kinds of seaweed have omega-3s. The one food that you may not recognize here is that last one, the tiger nuts. They're actually considered a tuber, so they're a little more carbohydrate based, but they're dried and they're crunchy. They kind of have a slightly sweet taste. And they offer a lot of those prebiotics, so that food for the good bacteria. Okay, so now moving on to our third category of how plants influence our overall health, and we're going to delve into hormones. I always like to kind of show these two pictures side by side. The right hand picture with all the colored circles has to do with chakras. And chakras are like these energy sources that, if you've ever practiced yoga, they'll talk about different chakras and energies. But what's really interesting is that each one of the chakras directly aligns to a different part of our endocrine system. Our endocrine system is what houses the hormones in our body. So if you have someone that is struggling with a part of their hormonal system, sometimes taking a step back and looking at those chakras and thinking about both foods and lifestyle things to help with fueling this area of your body is a very holistic way to think about it. Okay, so how do plants or foods even influence hormonal health and balance? Well, first of all, plants help to promote a normal weight. And I say normal weight, meaning a normal weight for you. I really don't love BMI. I know that's used in a lot of practices. BMI is a ratio of your weight to your height, but it's based on a very small, specific population when they created it that really can't be extended to others. So I mostly like to just look at people as individuals, body frames, how you are, what's your weight history. And it's really not about being overly thin. It's about being at a comfortable weight for you with incorporating some of the healthy diet and lifestyle tips that are promoted by the American Institute of Cancer Research. Um, Anyway, so plants in general have a lower energy quantity as compared with other animal products. Um, so, for example, eating a fruit or vegetable has a lot of water content in it. So, when you compare that to eating something that's not a whole plant and not a whole food. It may have more energy density to eat not a whole food versus a whole food. So all those things are helping to promote a normal body weight for you. We know to an extent that there's always hormones in animal products. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a horrible thing, but animals are beings, and so they have their own systems. And when we eat those things, we also can eat part of those systems in some way. So certainly, buying foods that are touted as hormone free or organic is one way to minimize hormone intake from animal sources, but certainly also just kind of thinking about that Mediterranean diet pyramid and eating those foods weekly as opposed to daily, regardless of what if it's organic or not, is a great way just to limit the amount of hormones you're ingesting just from doing that. Bile is next. We kind of spoke about how bile helps to balance hormones. It helps to literally rid and get rid of cholesterol. And so the body has to take new cholesterol, and sometimes it has to take it from hormones so that your bodies can function as it wants. Plants also promote regular bowel movements. And I know, again, we spoke about digestion and we spoke about the immune system and probiotics and the whole thing. But our digestive systems are also one way that we get rid of excess hormones. It's one of the ways that we kind of get things out. And then specifically dark green leafy vegetables, all in the cruciferous family. So I'm talking about broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale. I'm sure I'm missing others. Are in that cruciferous family. Contain certain phytochemicals that actually lower harmful levels of estrogen. So it contains something called DIM, indole 3-carbinol, calcium glucarate, all which help to detox excess hormones. And just living in the world we live in, both through products, different ingredients, their plastics, we can't necessarily always avoid these things, but doing anything that we can to minimize our exposure, but also help our bodies to get rid of any exposure, is helpful and a positive thing that we can focus on. And then which plants are the best to eat when it comes to fruits and vegetables? I always say eat the rainbow, as cliche as it is. You can think about, oh, last week I bought a bunch of strawberries, so then, I got my reds in, so maybe this week I'm gonna buy some blueberries so I can get my blues in. And last week I cooked broccoli with my dinner, and so this week I'm gonna buy summer squash and cook that so I get another color in. The more you can rotate colors or think about holistically what colors you eat most and incorporate others, the better you'll be because each color truly has a different function and a different benefit that you need and can get. So, how much fruits and vegetables specifically is recommended? Fruits, it's recommended to eat 5 to 7 servings per day. Vegetables, it's recommended to eat 4 to 7 servings per day. That may feel like a big reach for some people. So, as opposed to oftentimes letting that turn people off, setting small, realistic goals is always helpful. But then also, what exactly is a serving? So, one serving of fruit is 1 cup of fresh fruit or frozen fruit, or a medium piece of fruit. So sometimes, like if you have a big apple, that could be 2 servings of fruit, or a large banana could be 2 servings of fruit. So you may be getting in more servings than you think in a single setting. And similarly for vegetables, 1 cup of raw vegetables is a serving. But then, cooked vegetables may be a smaller serving depending on what it was. I have a cup for cooked vegetables. So again, if you have half your plate as fruits or vegetables, as is recommended by that My Plate, then you're probably getting at least 2 servings in there. And plants actually actively influence DNA repair as well. I know I've mentioned these buzzwords many times, phytochemicals, antioxidants, but specifically, antioxidants kind of work like bleach, cleaning things out from our bodies and stabilizing unstable cells, whereas phytochemicals is just a general word just describing some benefit that's in plant food that's not a vitamin or mineral. Can I just take a supplement? There are medical conditions that people can't eat fiber or can eat fruits and vegetables. And it's really important that we respect and honor what your body needs and not just say, well, it's really important that I get them in. If it's not good for your body, then we want to honor that. And there are other ways to get some of the nutrients in. And in some cases, supplements could be really helpful. But in general, if you're able to eat whole foods and whole fruits and vegetables, there really is no replacement. I know I had a slide in a previous version with like, you almost couldn't read it. There was so many little phytochemicals found in an apple. So if, for example, you just took quercetin, which is one of the phytochemicals, you'd also be missing out on all of those hundreds of other benefits that you get from just eating the apple. So that's just, again, zooming out. Then just a couple of other frequently asked questions is, will I get enough calcium on a plant-based diet? I know calcium, it can be a big concern. Plant-based also, I just want to say, doesn't necessarily mean being a vegan or vegetarian. It just means making plants the bulk of your diet, similar to that Mediterranean pyramid. So oftentimes we think of calcium-rich foods as being in dairy products. So, but that being said, there are lots of plant-based foods that contain calcium. People get concerned that there's a lower percentage in the plants, but it's actually in a more absorbable form as compared with dairy products. So we absorb more, even though there's less. And very interestingly, when there's epidemiological studies or population studies looking at um, populations that have highest rates of things like osteoporosis, they have found that those populations actually have a more sedentary lifestyle and eat more animal products compared with those populations that don't. So again, exercise and movement of any kind helps to build muscle, and muscle helps to strengthen bones. So without it, it's hard, even if you have the building block of calcium. We also know that if someone's eating excessive animal protein, the body actually will take some calcium out of the bones to kind of neutralize the amino acids or the building blocks of protein that we're ingesting to just keep our bodies level and at homeostasis. But I wanted to include this slide as well, just to show you there are lots of calcium-rich plants. So yes, there's fortified milk products, soy milk, almond milk, oat milk now, right? But then a lot of dark green vegetables have a fair amount of calcium. Here we have collard greens, but similarly, broccoli has a lot of calcium. Tofu has a decent amount of calcium. White beans, bok choy, edamame, kale, figs, chia seeds. Chia seeds are a great thing to sprinkle here and there. They have those anti-inflammatory omega-3s too. Tahini, black beans, almonds. So there's lots of ways to get calcium, but sometimes you just have to be a little more intentional. Can I get enough protein on a plant-based diet? Yes. Remember back to the beginning of the presentation, we were talking about how much protein that a person actually needs. Ish is to take your weight, divided it by 2.2. That's your weight in kilograms, but that's also the amount of grams approximately of protein that you need in a typical day. Um, I think that, again, this slide looks like it's about fat, even though the protein question was actually on another slide. But anywho, um, the protein will come back to the fat. But yes, you can get enough protein from eating a plant-based diet. Sometimes you just have to be a little more intentional about it. So 3 ounces of something like tempeh, which is a plant-based protein. 3 ounces is about the size of your palm or a deck of cards, is between 16 and 18 ounces. Um, Quinoa, a cup is about 8 grams. 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds is about 10 grams. So there's lots of ways to get protein through plants, but again, you may just have to be a little more intentional about it. I also wanted to put these couple things as other ways to add in plant proteins to your diet. So nutritional yeast, for anyone not familiar with it, it's sort of like a condiment. It looks like almost like Parmesan cheese. It's very high in B vitamins and has some protein. So you can kind of sprinkle it on anything that you would sprinkle Parmesan cheese on, whether it's pasta or popcorn or, anything of that nature. You can also blend white beans into sauce. It makes the sauce creamy. You don't really taste it and will boost up the protein. Nuts and seeds, bean-based pastas, which are a great thing that's been on the market and added. And then just cycling here, is a high protein or low protein diet better for overall health? So I just wanted to draw your attention to this because when it comes to nutrition, there is no one size fits all, which makes, I think, it very confusing. And also, sometimes, like when the media runs with a headline, yes, what they're saying may be true or found in a study, but may not apply to everyone. So, in general, this study was just done on rats. So, again, may or may not be translatable to humans, but they found rats on a moderate to low protein diet to have lower risk of disease, whereas rats on a very, very high protein diet to have higher risk of disease. By contrast, for older rats, so in this case, they're saying 66 or older, the low protein diet actually increased disease risk and risk of mortality as compared with the high protein diets. And I think one of the reasons, like plausible reasons, might just be is the fact that we don't store protein. And as we get older, we might have lower muscle stores. And so, if you're not eating enough protein, your body is going to draw upon your muscles, which is going to lead to more weakness, etc. So fat is present in certain plant-based foods. We talked about olive oil as being a plant-based fat. Avocados, olives, coconuts are other sources of plant-based fats. And many plant-based fats are unsaturated. Unsaturated means liquid at room temperature and generally speaking, more anti-inflammatory. Um, those omega-3 fats, which we oftentimes think about in fish, but we also spoke about as being found in hemp seeds and chia seeds and flax seeds and seaweeds, are very, very anti-inflammatory forms of fat that are naturally found. And although we don't absorb the kind of omega-3 found in plants quite as well as the kind of omega-3 found in fish, your body is smart. When you don't have enough omega-3 circulating in your body, it will actually upregulate the absorption of the omega type of omega-3 found in plants. Okay, can I get all of my essential amino acids from plants? Amino acids are basically the building blocks of protein. Essential amino acids are the amino acids or building blocks of protein that we can't make and we have to get. So, yes, you can. However, in nature, there are a lot of incomplete sources of protein. So what that means is they contain some of the essential amino acids, but not all. So you'll see lentils and chickpeas and black beans and peanuts and seeds and almonds and oats and whatnot contain some of the essential amino acids, but not all of them. And that's where a lot of protein combining comes into play. And traditionally in different cultures, you'll see a lot of this natural protein combining as a way to just make sure people are getting everything they need. So, rice and beans. The beans contain some of the essential amino acids, and the grain or the rice contains the others. Similarly to hummus and pita, or peanut butter and jelly. You're getting the legume and the grain. The legume and the grain have complementary amino acids. It also doesn't mean that you have to eat all of the complementary amino acids at one meal, but certainly over the course of the day, over the course of the week, you want to make sure you're getting a mixture of food groups to just make sure you're getting all of them. There are a few complete sources of plant proteins too, meaning they have all of the essential amino acids just in there. So soy foods, which I know for some people feel a little scary or controversial, and we can always get into that and or do a whole presentation on that. Quinoa is another has all the complete essential amino acids in it. So do hemp seeds, chia seeds, other grains like amaranth. What about organic foods, especially when it comes to plants? Like, how do I have to think about it and what do I need to know? So, when it comes to plants, we know that eating plant-based foods has more benefits than risks, regardless of whether it's organic or not. So, we just want you to sit with that for a second. Certainly, if you have the opportunity and ability to buy organic, sure, you're going to reduce the amount of pesticides that were sprayed on there, but that's not always um, accessible for everybody. And then secondly, if you're stuck in a situation where there's a non-organic piece of produce, it's certainly better that you eat it than you don't. You're going to get more benefits. Sometimes I like to think about which fruits and vegetables to prioritize organic in terms of this Clean 15 and this Dirty Dozen list. The Clean 15 list has the top 15 fruits and vegetables that are not sprayed a lot with pesticides, and a lot of them sort of make sense, right? So you got watermelon, which you're cutting anyway, the skin off, and things of that nature. Whereas the Dirty Dozen list has the top 12 fruits and vegetables that are likely to be more heavily sprayed. And actually, they update this list every year. So if you have the ability to buy these organic, then great, you're going to be reducing your risk of pesticide ingestion by more. But again, there's still benefits to buying and eating fruits and vegetables regardless. Interestingly enough, there's some studies on organic pesticides. They're not necessarily safer, right? Poison could be made from something natural, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's safer. Um, there's lots of different farming practices that are out there that are meant to keep pests away in more natural way, which are good to look for if, again, you have the ability. Um, and then just thinking about plant-based diets in terms of the environment, we know that plant-based diets are better for the environment. It takes so much more energy to keep up with um, meat farming and meat production and fish production than it does for plants. And also, animals contribute more to greenhouse gases than plants do. So we know that certainly a plant-based diet is better for the environment. I wanted to include at least one recipe for everyone to take a look at. It's a rainbow bean salad. I think that we're going to have the ability to email it to anyone who wants it. And it has a lemon Dijon vinaigrette dressing, especially for anyone having taste changes. We know that things with a little bit of tang help to really cut through those taste changes. So the lemon and the mustard could be really, really helpful. It's also a nice thing that you can make ahead of time if you're going to a barbecue or an outdoor gathering. That is pretty good in terms of it's not like mayonnaise where it's going to spoil quickly.